called geometric, the earliest period, then archaic, then classical, which most of us are familiar with visually. That's the high point of Greek culture. And then something called late classical. But high classical is when you see these most famous statues. The Apollo Belvedere on the left, you can see it's from 320 BCE. And Alexander Slovantsov created the Aphrodite of Milos. You might know it as Venus de Milo. But they represent the standard of perfection and beauty to the Greeks in art, male and female. And both these statues are held up as the model of perfection right through the 19th century. Now that brings us to the Roman Empire. The Greek Empire is about culture and beauty. Yes, they're conquerors, but they're about culture and beauty and aesthetics and philosophy. The Romans, I'll just tell you a little blurb about the Romans. I just told you what the Greeks are famous for, right? Culture, art, philosophy. They invented geometry. They invented the idea of harmony and balance, and man is the measure of all things. What the Romans are famous for, besides conquering all of the Mediterranean rim up to from Scotland to Syria, what they're most famous for is city planning and poured concrete. Not exactly aesthetically minded. In fact, all these statues, see it says after Leochares, with only a few exceptions, the most we know about Greek statues, the masterpieces of Greek sculpture, are Roman copies of Greek originals. We think that most of the Greek statues are originally made in bronze. The Romans took them, copied them in marble, and then threw the original away because they didn't care about the original, because they're not aesthetically minded. They care more about having art than making art, because to them it was stuff. It shows how rich you are if you can buy a Greek statue or have 20 of them made for your house. And there are many copies all over the world of these famous statues because the Romans copied them over and over again, and they tossed the original on the dump heap because they didn't care. So that's the Romans. The Romans, like Americans, are pragmatic. They're great engineers, they're great builders, they like big things. This is a reconstruction of what Rome probably looked like around 320 BC, around the same time that the Apollo Belvedere copy was made. The original was made 320 and then the Roman copy, and this is about that same time. So Rome supplanted Greece. They conquered Greece. Greece had many colonies on the west coast of Italy and Sicily. And when the Romans became, let's say, aggressive in their nature as a culture, they started expanding, and the first thing they did was start conquering Greek colonies on the peninsula of Italy. And eventually, of course, they started spreading out everywhere else. So this is the height of the power of the Roman Empire. This is what it looks like. This is probably the biggest city in the ancient world. It had over 1 million citizens. In the center, right, you can see the Colosseum. This is called the Circus Maximus, where they had, the chariot races. This is the Markets of Hadrian. There are all kinds of landmarks that you can see in this model, and they're just, the Roman Forum is in the middle. There are all kinds of landmarks that you can see when you go to Rome. They're all in ruins now, of course. There are two periods in Roman history: Republican Rome and Imperial Rome. Of course, we're talking about empire. Augustus, or Octavian, is the first Roman emperor. Interestingly, Julius Caesar, who conquered the whole world for Rome, when he came back to Rome to settle down, he was so powerful because he had the entire Roman army in the palm of his hand. He said to the Roman Senate, "Give me something." They said, "How about first consul of Rome? It's a nice title, makes you sound good." Caesar said, "Not bad." And he went home and slept on it. I'm compressing time here. And he said the next day, "I don't think so. Consul? What's that? It's a title. I want more." They said, "No, you can't have any more." He said, "Okay, well, see that army back there with 100,000 soldiers ready to storm the gates of the city? You going to give me something, or are we going to walk in and take over?" And the Senate said, "Okay, we'll give you something. We'll make you the first citizen of Rome." He said, "I don't think so." So he declared himself emperor. Emperor of Rome. However, I said there are two periods in Roman history. What was the first period called? Republican Rome. What is a republic? Basically. Well, it's not one leader. What is the form of government is what I'm asking, generally. I didn't hear you. No, that's too specific. It's representative. It's democratic. So if you have a guy saying, you government made of senators and plebeians, which is like senators and House of Representatives we have today, forget you. I'm the absolute rule. I have all the power. I'm declaring myself the Emperor of Rome. So what happens shortly after that? He doesn't just die. He gets assassinated on his way to give a speech to the Senate about how powerful he is. You're only as powerful as the assassin that kills you, right? So Caesar's dead. And then Rome goes through about 25 years of civil war because all of his generals now want to take over where he left off. Doesn't work too well. It's just civil war. The Senate finally decides they're going to grow up and not act like, hurt little children after 25 years of violence. And they say, we have to make someone a leader here, someone who everybody likes. And so they pick Julius Caesar's nephew, Octavian. And what did they call him? They called him Emperor Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. So Rome is no longer a republic. Rome is now an empire. It's imperial Rome. It's changed because they didn't know how to handle the chaos. And so this is an image of Augustus. And he was actually a pretty good ruler because this is called the Ara Pacis Augusti. It's an altar to peace. He built it because under his rule there was not much fighting going on in the entire Roman Empire. And that peace roughly I say, nothing's absolute, lasted for about 150 years. So he was good at initiating it, but other emperors that came after him weren't so successful. Because the Romans are basically violent, aggressive as a culture. Violent and aggressive. But they like building big stuff. They're good engineers. So they built aqueducts all over the Roman world to bring water, fresh running water to cities everywhere in the Roman Empire. They built big stadiums to please the people. This was built by the Emperor Vespasian to have the games for the people to come and enjoy. It's roughly our football. You want to go see violence and experience violence vicariously by, eating popcorn and watching people kill each other. It's lots of fun. Today we watch people crunch each other with pads on. It's called football. Same mentality. We're just that close to killing, but not quite. And then there's hockey, of course. The inside of the Colosseum was amazing from an engineering standpoint, because although it's just kind of a riddled ruin now because it's been pillaged and earthquakes and things like that, the floor could be covered with a big movable floor, and it could actually be watertight, and they would actually have naval battles on the floor of the Colosseum. So it's a huge place. Holds 50,000 spectators. I know we have bigger stadiums than that today, but for back then that was tremendous. So one other little trivial point. What do we call generally round stadiums? Well, sometimes they're coliseums. There's a generic name. No, that's the roof. They're called arenas. You know what the word arena means in Latin? It's the sand that absorbs the blood of those who died in the Colosseum. So next time you go into an arena, think of that. Arena is the sand that absorbs the blood of dead people. Gladiators, in other words. Because they like large things and like celebrating their power, the Roman emperors always constructed themselves triumphal arches after some successful campaign. This is the Arch of Titus, the son of Vespasian, who built the Colosseum. Titus was charged with Vespasian with putting down the Jewish wars in what is today Israel, the only people that actually fought the Romans and succeeded on a moral level. They were defeated physically, but the Romans didn't conquer them because the Jews in Israel refused to give up their religion for the Romans. Everyone else did. And in 70 AD, the Romans, under Titus, went into Jerusalem and destroyed the Holy Temple. And when Titus came back to Rome, he had a triumphal arch built after he came back, celebrating that victory. And you can see inside the arch shows the Roman soldiers carrying back the treasure from the Jewish temple. That's the candelabra that was in the temple. And you probably recognize that as a very common Jewish symbol today still, after 2,000 years. They like to build large temples, columns that talk about stories and victories of emperors. The Pantheon is the largest intact Roman temple in the world. And the Trajan's column on the right celebrates Trajan's victory over the Dacians. They're kind of in northeastern Europe. And he came back and he had this 60-foot column erected with a spiral narrative telling about his victories over his enemies. So everything's large to the Romans. Anyone ever hear of Constantine the Great?
Yes.
What do we call what is today Istanbul before it was Istanbul? Constantinople. He named it after himself. He's a very selfless person, right?
Of course.
He was the first emperor to actually make Christianity legal in the Roman Empire. And according to legend, on his deathbed, he converted to Christianity. When he